18 Fahrenheit out. It dropped in pressure a little bit. Alright, so software v12 FSD 12.5.6.4. This is going to be a mostly highway morning, I was going to say morning rush hour, but I think we're too early for rush hour. But drive from Troy to Romulus, right by the airport. So it's got its turn signal on super early, but at least it's not jumping in the turn signal lane.
But Joni Ernst is well aware that she's no longer going to be the natural replacement to beat Hegseth if his nomination were to fail. And so effectively, if you stand in the way of these efforts, do not expect that you're going to have a willing partner at the White House when it comes time to press legislation or parts of the budget that you want to see in your term in office.
Michael Elise here. Just to go back to some of these nominees, you mentioned that you think Tulsi is the most likely to get shot down. She does, though, have a cult following of sorts, and that's kind of what Trump is pulled into by picking RFK Jr., who also has his own following. Do Republican senators take that calculus into their decision when they decide whether or not to vote for her?
I mean, I think some do. Look, this cuts at the heartstring of this form of the Republican Party and its leadership. some of the things that she said about Russia, etc. And that's somewhat to be expected. How much do the senators buy that to get past their inherent sort of knee-jerk objection? That's going to be the test of the confirmation process for them. Then, the rest of it, Trump will, I think, and he started to do this, sort of give, I'll put this person out, Pete Exeth, etc. Pete's looking stronger, but I don't sense this overwhelming. That's my guy. You better, put him in. Certainly not with Tulsi. So we'll see how the senators react and whether or not they take that advice and consent part. I suspect they will.
Michael Steele, thank you as always. We, of course, will be watching the weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, starting at 8 a.m. right here on NBC. And NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, thank you as always for your reporting as well. Still ahead, New York City police are revealing new details about how the suspect in the healthcare CEO murder was able to evade authorities for days. We'll have a live report next on Morning Jet.
This is the center of this season's favorite gift. For a limited time, Omaha Steaks is offering their favorite gift package that includes our famous bacon-wrapped filet mignon, our delicious air-chilled chicken breast, burgers, franks, sides, and desserts, all for just $89.99. That's 64% off. Order now will include 4 more burgers free, and we'll deliver in time for Christmas. This exclusive offer ends soon in quantities only. Don't miss out. Order today at omahasteaks.com/TV.
I love this. Want a gentle way to relieve constipation? Try great tasting Colay's gummies. They work by increasing water in the stool, making it softer, so it's easier to go, with no harsh laxatives, cramping, or straining. Gentle constipation relief with great tasting Colay's gummies.
With Dexcom G7, managing your diabetes just got easier. So, what's your glucose number right now? Good thing you don't need a finger stick. How's all that food affect your glucose? Oh, the answer's on your phone. What if you're heading low at night? Wow, it can alert you. And you can even track your goals. Manage your diabetes with confidence with Dexcom G7, the most accurate CGM. Learn more at Dexcom.com.
Eggs make all our family moments better, especially when they're Eggland's Best. Tastes so fresh and amazing, deliciously superior nutrition, too. For us, it's eggs any style, as long as they're the best. Eggland's Best.
Advil liquid gels are faster and stronger than Tylenol rapid release gels. Also from Advil targeted relief, the only topical with 4 powerful pain-fighting ingredients that start working on contact and lasts up to 8 hours. What are folks 60 and older learning these days?
New perspectives.
How to fix things.
Fun recipe.
Do your dry eyes still feel gritty, rough, or tired? With Mybo, eyes can feel Mybo is the only prescription dry eye drop that forms.
Wow, so I can always respect that. And he went out and talked about how Jim Mattis made the wrong decisions in the Defense Department, and that was a Trump appointee. And Trump does acknowledge he has a lot of people that he's very disappointed in, right? And that were his top picks. So, all right, Greg Kelly, you got one there. Way to stick up for what you believe.
Totally agree with you on that. All right, well, why don't we take a break? When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Luigi Bagnone. And more importantly, there's some movement when it comes to healthcare in America. What do I mean by that? You're going to have to come back to find out.
Join the journey by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, member-only chat, exclusive shop designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real, positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
Reimagine exceptional with the 2024 Buick Envision. With advanced technology and breathtaking clarity, and quiet serenity within. Experience confident drive, an all-wheel drive that takes you wherever you need to go. Make every day an occasion. Buick, exceptional by design.
GM employees with a current eligible Buick lease get this ultra-low mileage lease on this 2024 Buick Envision Preferred all-wheel drive for $299 per month.
Missed business calls? They're expensive. Stop missing valuable calls for good. Visit alltrackingmetrics.com.
Let's talk a little bit about, an interesting decision that was made by a news organization in regard to the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson.
In just the last 24 hours, social media users have seized on the suspect's appearance. It's yet another sign of the toxicity of the public discourse in the U.S.
He's a murderer, a killer. And I worry that our society in general tends to kind of like the outlaw.
Only if he's good looking.
Maybe, you may be right. I mean,
If he were a pudgy little guy, nobody would support him.
For those news organizations and media figures, that ain't it. That's not it in any way, shape, or form. And for those news organizations and media figures to make light of it in any way, it's absolutely reprehensible.
Asperger's.
I think the guy's that good looking.
His eyebrows are horrible.
I took a poll of my staff, the females today, and they said he was average.
The media is getting pretty upset because it turns out that the people have spoken and they believe that the United Healthcare CEO assassin, Luigi Mangione, is a looker, attractive, and he's a thirst trap. And I get it. I totally understand why people would be upset about saying anything positive about a guy who murdered someone in cold blood. However, some news organizations are taking this a bit too far, and I want to give you an example based on some recent reporting from Ken Klippenstein over at his Substack page. He writes that on Tuesday, New York Times management said the news value and public service of showing Mangione's face is diminishing, instructing staff to dial back its use of such photos. It also directed that Luigi's manifesto not be published in the paper. I don't know why they would decide to avoid informing the people about something as important as someone's manifesto, which clearly states what the motive of the assassination was, but nonetheless, we visited the front page of the New York Times when producing this story, and sure enough, there isn't a single image of Mangione's face to be found. So let's take a look at this next graphic. What is extradition? Can fighting it help the Midtown shooting suspect? So only in an article called, titled that, can you see Mangione's back. That's the only image that's available on New York Times website.
Yeah. So look, I get it. Some people find him attractive. They're going to comment on it, and other people are going to yell at him for commenting on it.
Right.
But can you please trust me that that's not the main point here? And can we focus on the fact that both people on the left and right
There's
are
a history of
furious
crashes for the next 0.5 miles. Drive safe.
And guys, it's not, think about it this way. Like, when I've seen shooters throughout, all the time I've been covering news here, they're very, very rarely celebrated outside of a frame. Certainly not in media, certainly not in a way that bursts out into the public.
Exactly.
Right? So whether they're mass shooters, school shooters, whether they're right-wing shooters killing Latinos or synagogue, or it's a left-wing guy doing it, whatever, never celebrated, right? This guy celebrated well before we even knew what he looked like. And why? Because United Healthcare denies 32% of the procedures that people ask for. Now, since that's happened, an avalanche of comments that I've read, let alone all over the internet, right? I got denied for this, I got denied for that. We had cancer. Well, what about you? What do you want me to do? Die? What do you like?
Vehicle on shoulder ahead.
Things that you absolutely need for your kids to be able to survive, and they're like, it's an elective surgery. It's not an elective surgery, right? We're not talking about liposuction here, etc. There's so many things that they deny that is core to your health and to literally being able to live. And not just them, but all of the entire industry. So if you're focusing on his looks, you miss the point intensely.
Yes, I agree. So, with that in mind, I mean, Jake is alluding to something very real and something that's felt across the political spectrum. Again, I want to reiterate, that doesn't justify murdering people, that doesn't change the system. But I think that our politicians are finally starting to wake up to the fact that the vast majority of Americans are furious at our broken healthcare system. So a new report in The Lever helps to explain why Americans are so furious at the American healthcare system. They write the following: the country's largest health insurers have invested over $120 billion into repurchasing their own shares since the passage of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. And those insurers include United Health Group, Cigna, Elevance Health, and CVS Health. So these stock buybacks are taking priority over what the company is actually supposed to do for Americans. In recent years, top C-suites across the healthcare industry have authorized more spending on stock buybacks than on company research and development. And the company that did the most stock buybacks, you guessed it, United Healthcare. So 44% of buyback expenditures came from United Health Group, which covers more Americans than any other private insurer or health insurer. United Health has increased its annual share repurchasing program by 217% since 2010, dumping a whopping $54 billion into buybacks during that time. Meanwhile, Americans are getting screwed by these exact companies. Families spent an average of 55% more on their healthcare premiums in 2020 than they did in 2010. On a per-person basis, healthcare spending by Americans with private insurance grew by 61% from 2008 to 2022. 1 in 4 Americans say they've avoided seeking healthcare in the past year because of the cost. Half of all U.S. adults say they'd be unable to afford an unexpected $500 medical expense, and medical bills account for 40% of U.S. bankruptcies. Don't allow the powerful to see you feeling hopeless. Even if you do feel hopeless, wallow in your pity and your misery. And I believe me, I do it all the time in the privacy of your own home, but never let them see.
Live picture from top of the building in New York City at our headquarters at Rockefeller Plaza as we hit the bottom of the hour here on this Friday the 13th. We'll look at some of the other stories making headlines this morning. Beginning next month, American travelers heading to the UK will have to fill out authorizations online. Those headed to the EU will face new regulations as well. The changes come as more countries step up security. The United States also requires foreign travelers to complete authorizations ahead of their trips. Tonight's Mega Millions lottery has climbed to at least $670 million. It's the 5th largest jackpot of the year. If a winner is named and opts for a lump sum prize, The payout would be around $300 million after taxes. And an 18-year-old has just become the youngest person ever to be crowned world champion of chess. Gukesh Demiraju broke the record set by Russia's Garry Kasparov in 1985. Kasparov was 22 when he became world champion. Born and raised in India, Demiraju was first recognized as a chess grandmaster at the age of 12. Kasparov congratulating the new champ on social media, writing, "He has summited the highest peak of all, making his mother happy." Our big congratulations to him as well. After more than 50 years in the anchor chair, legendary broadcast journalist Chuck Scarborough stepped down yesterday from anchoring the news at NBC4 New York, our neighbor in the building at 30 Rock. Here is Chuck's final sign-off from last night's 6 p.m. newscast.
Well, as you may have heard, this is my final broadcast as anchor of the evening news at NBC4 New York. First and foremost, I am profoundly grateful for your trust. Without that, I would not have survived for more than half a century in this job and been allowed to occupy this front row seat to history of our fascinating metropolis and the world beyond for so long. 4 months after I arrived in 1974, President Nixon, who won a landslide election just 2 years earlier, resigned. The first presidential resignation in the nation's history. In 1975, New York City plunged into effective bankruptcy, and the Vietnam War came to a chaotic end. The pace of breaking news has been relentless ever since. We've been through blackouts together, riots, crime waves, hurricanes, blizzards, economic crises, corruption, public and private, 9/11, wars, and a pandemic. But just as important were the stories of human achievement in the arts and sciences, of forgiveness, kindness, recovery, and resilience. If there is one overarching lesson I've learned, it is that. We are more resilient than we realize, individually and as a city.
By this industry, a quarter of Americans, for example, choose not to get health care because they're worried about the cost. So there might be something wrong with them. They might have internal bleeding. They might have an infection, and they choose not to go get care, and that's why some of them die because they're so worried about the cost. So this is a system that is very literally killing us. And as it's doing that, they're taking $120 billion off the table in profits. So guys, it's not about, oh my God, United Healthcare CEO is so greedy. And if they had a different CEO, he would be less greedy or more patriotic or more moral. It doesn't work that way. This is the entire industry. And anytime you say maximize profit on healthcare, they are always, no matter what happens, that's their only goal. They're always going to cover the least amount and charge you the most amount, because that is how you maximize profits. So all of these nonsense conversations about is someone moral or is the other person immoral is irrelevant and ridiculous. If you make it a for-profit system, you will always get terrible results. Remember, guys, if you have universal health care like every other developed nation, you can layer on private health care on top. Nobody's stopping you from that, right? But you've got to at least protect the citizens through cops, firefighters, military, and health insurance.
So is there any hope of our lawmakers working on legislation to fix this broken system? And would that legislation even come to fruition? Well, look, I'm going to be honest. Obviously, at this moment, with the corruption baked into our system, the chances are still very low. However, there is a small development that I want to talk about. So yesterday, there was senators and congresspeople who introduced a bill that would take on certain healthcare companies. The federal legislation would prohibit companies that own drug middlemen, aka PBMs, or health insurers from also owning pharmacy businesses. So CVS Health, Cigna, and United Health each own a major health insurer, a pharmacy benefit manager, and a pharmacy business. Any company that owns a PBM and or health insurer and a pharmacy business, based on this legislation, if it were to pass, would be forced to divest from their pharmacy business within 3 years. The Senate bill was sponsored by Democrat Elizabeth Warren and Republican Josh Hawley. By the way, Josh Hawley has really shown in good faith that he's willing to work across the aisle to pass some of these economic populist bills. So I want to give him credit for that every time he does it. It's really good to see it. Now, the House bill was sponsored by Democrat Jake Auchincloss and Republican Diana Barger. These names are hard. Anyway, Warren said of the bill, PBMs have manipulated the market to enrich themselves, hiking up drug costs, cheating employers, and driving small pharmacies out of business. That is absolutely true. I think a lot of people have seen this happen in their own neighborhoods. My new bipartisan bill with Senator Josh Hawley will rein in these middlemen. And by the way, Josh Hawley released a statement saying the insurance companies are out of control. They need to be broken up. No more buying up doctors' practices. Totally agree. Private equity firms have been doing that and it's been a disaster. No more owning pharmacies. Start putting patients first. That's what my new bill will do.
Yeah, so when Josh Hawley stopped taking corporate PAC money, he started saying some positive things. And I said, oh, look at that. That's interesting. You know, the minute he stops getting funded by corporate rule, he starts opposing corporate. And a lot of folks on the left said, oh, you're so naive. That's Josh Hawley. He's so evil. He's not going to actually vote that way. This is all a trick. Except that now he's starting to vote that way. And not only vote that way, he's co-sponsoring the bills. And he's now done this a number of times. It doesn't mean you have to agree with his other opinions. His social opinion, his opinions on social issues, cultural war issues, I hate them. I don't agree with them. And so over Bernie Sanders, of course not. Of course not, because I agree with Bernie on both sides, right? But if you're pretending that he's not actually voting in the right way on some issues, and on populist issues, economic issues, you're wrong. He is voting the right way.
Let's take our final break of the day, and when we come back, do you want to do this update?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a big update for you in regard to Doge and Cenk's, proposals for it. We'll be right back.
New York Daily News. It is so important for people to know what's happening in their city, in their town, in their state, in their neighborhood. And we've seen such a decline of local news, particularly on the print side across the country. But the TV viewership, there's worries there as well. And it's just seeing Chuck go really is sort of like an end of an era in some way, but also emphasizes just how important these voices are and how important it is to earn the viewer's trust.
Yeah, he will be missed.
As is House Speaker Mike Johnson. However, some lawmakers say that they and the public need more information after weeks of sightings. We want to thank you for letting us into your homes during these extraordinary times. We are so grateful. The Beat with Ari Melber starts right now. Hi, Ari.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks so much. Welcome to The Beat. I'm Ari Melber, and tonight we have news about how the government will be run in this period of rising inequality and this populist anger at elites who blatantly enrich themselves. That stretches from the corporate healthcare industry to politicians giving themselves and their donors tax cuts. But to get there, we're going to begin a little further back in history with concerns about the politicians' swampy corruption. More on that swamp monster and that old movie in just a moment, but I can tell you that reformers have been battling corruption in Washington for a long, long time, and sometimes it's actually useful, especially in times like these, to go back and look. From the progressive trust busters to even some traditional conservatives like John McCain, there's actually a very long history with peaks and valleys, ebb and flow, of people, reformers, trying to take on corruption in their ranks.
We've got to clean up our act. You were mentioning how the war in Iraq may have hurt me. I think the biggest blow to our base wasn't the war in Iraq. It was spending going completely out of control and the corruption. Look, I don't use the word corruption lightly. We have former Republican members of Congress in federal prison. And unfortunately, there's more to come.
Republicans in prison and more to come. The lawmakers in trouble for corruption. And that was back when top Republicans, McCain, of course, got his party's nomination eventually, top Republicans said it was bad to be on the wrong side of the law or a corruption case or be convicted or go to prison. We can get into how it's a little different in this MAGA era, but that warning from Senator McCain came from someone who saw that from within and that unchecked corruption will grow. It doesn't just sit at some level where a few people are self-dealing when they get away with it. When more politicians and politicos and hangers-on and lobbyists and business types find out they can profit off direct corruption, which in some ways is quote-unquote easier than going out and earning an honest buck, well, they do more and more of it. Now, back in the 50s, what I showed you there was the swamp monster from that movie, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. We can leave it up. You can see the special effects might be a little different. Maybe you find that visage of that swamp monster more comical than scary because it's been, 75 years and we've updated our ability to make scary movies and special effects, although she looks scared. The analogy, though, is how this kind of swampy corruption should be scary to all of us. And there's long been concerns about abuse of power. It's as old as the studies of power. We hear about that term, for example, when it comes to politicians being honest or abusing law enforcement. But what's going on now, and the reason this is our top story tonight, is that some of the richest people in the world are in a position where they can see that it's going to be open season, that they'll be able to police themselves or even beat up on the parts of government, sometimes called the, quote, deep state, that patrols these things, that they can get away with self-dealing with what is sometimes what amounts to graft or corruption, which is something the founders tried to patrol in America. And one of the ways to patrol it, and I'm going to be as clear as possible, one way to patrol it is to punish it after the fact. That's the traditional policing. So when John McCain talked about members of Congress going to prison, and by the way, if a member of Congress, under the fair order of the rule of law and a fair process and a fair jury, is convicted of corruption or self-dealing, stealing your money, abusing your power and the vote you gave them, absolutely they should go to prison. I don't care what party they're in. But that is an after-the-fact effort. Now, we have seen that with Republicans, Trump veterans in the recent era, where they're in trouble sometimes for their business activities, which crossed a line. Trump's first campaign chair in 2016, Republican Paul Manafort. He was ultimately caught up in the investigation from the Mueller probe, and he went to prison partly for those kind of things. Corruption crimes. Or the current DOJ got a conviction against a Democrat, Senator Bob Menendez from New Jersey. The FBI literally found gold bars in his home, which he couldn't account for. And again, fair process, but he was convicted of corruption for taking those kind of things because he took your vote and the power you gave him, and in the way that Paul Manafort or other Republicans were found guilty, he was found guilty of abusing that. So that's after the fact. Now I'm going to go to step 2, which is you don't always have to sit around and wait for bad stuff to happen. There can be rules to prevent that kind of graft in the first place. So when you hear sometimes these things, these statements or headlines about ethics rules, which frankly sounds a little vague and boring, or you hear about transparency, which is a word that often is misused because we've seen a lot of people who want to do financial or political crime talk about transparency, but the actual honest transparency means that people are empowered through requirements, information, disclosure, and a free and open and fair press that can check in on these things, that through all that process you find out what your government's up to. Or there are the limits on campaign money. You've probably heard about that. We've had debates over campaign finances for many decades. The Supreme Court over time has recently basically weakened those rules. All of that tries to prevent this kind of graft before it starts. That's why it matters tonight that the Trump team is playing to further dilute ethics protections. So before we get bogged down in the dry language of that, the reason why I'm showing you the swamp creature, showing you John McCain, remind you of the larger history is those ethics protections are not only good for the country to have an honest government, they're also probably good for those people who don't want to end up like Democrat Menendez or Republican Manafort. Because if we can stop this stuff before it starts, we don't have the financial or corruption crime to begin with. The Trump team, though, is taking a very different tack. They want to make it easier to do self-dealing. They blatantly admit they want to take money from foreign powers, from people who are doing the government business, but also might be doing business on behalf of themselves. And they're giving more power to billionaires who have ongoing interests that cut against or conflict with the general public and taxpayers. Everything I've just said to you is documented. I'm going to show you a little more detail. And everything I've just said to you is nonpartisan. Because whether it's Menendez or a Trump campaign chair Manafort, whether it's Elon Musk, a billionaire associated with the right, or some other billionaire Soros associated with the left, if these people inside government or have their allies inside government doing things for them instead of you, well, that's a violation of the whole point of having a public government and a democracy that represents you. And remember, Trump's first term was rocked by ethics scandals. I'm showing you just in brief form several big people who ran entire agencies who weren't just caught, weren't just embarrassed, but remember, even in the Trump world where nothing's supposed to matter, each one of them ultimately left or resigned over these ethics failures. It was too much for them, even in the first term. Which brings us to the swamp. In 2019, there were protesters who actually were right to warn about this. And what you're seeing on your screen, the sort of creature dropping up, this is not AI. This was a real hearing where the activists put on that mask to try to highlight the so-called swampiness. That I showed you earlier, this was a Senate confirmation for Trump's pick for the very interior job, which I just showed you was later forced out over ethics concerns. You can see the creature over his shoulder.
That's awesome.
Just when you thought...
Oh, come on. I'm all the way here. Let's see what happens. I'm giving it gas, or I'm accelerating. Are you just gonna go straight, or are you gonna actually turn me? Oh no! I always wondered what would happen if you just let this go, and I guess it actually, yeah. Although if you hit the accelerator, it's still gonna start driving. We want to go this way.
The point was that just saying dry ethics reform or the ethics rules are diluted or can you believe there's a foreign money provision, yada, 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 all of that can kind of melt and blend into whatever, the ether.
Yada, yada, yada. Let's get into the good parking spot if you can do that without driving over. Nope, we're not gonna let you drive over that. Yeah, I think it was gonna drive right over the curb. I did not want to risk smashing my bumper this morning. Stupid warnings. I still don't see how they do this. This is software that people are paying for, so how are you going to lock them out of it? Auto store beta and full self-driving supervised will no longer operate after 4 strikeouts. Yeah, but that keeps getting reset, so we're all good.